Okay, let's just jump right in and unpack this. I mean, it feels like this monumental challenge that is facing, well, pretty much every organization in the cloud right now.
It really is.
We're living in this era of hyperscale, this rapid innovation where infrastructure is just spun up, torn down, modified constantly. And, that incredible speed, it often seems to come at the expense of necessary vigilance.
It's the defining tension of the modern technology landscape, isn't it? It's that velocity versus security hygiene. And the data on this point is, well, it's absolutely brutal.
I've seen the numbers. They're staggering.
They are. I mean, the industry consensus, backed by all the major reports, it indicates that through 2025, something like 99% of all cloud security failures will be attributed directly to customer-side misconfigurations.
99%.
99.
Yeah.
When you really let that number sink in, it forces a pretty difficult realization. The primary threat isn't some sophisticated zero-day attack or a nation-state hacker. It's the basics. It's the fundamental things that organizations are just, failing to maintain at scale.
That number should be a massive wake-up call for everyone. We're not just talking about, unpatched VMs anymore, are we?
No, not at all.
We're talking about systemic missteps, things like storage buckets left with overly permissive public access or, excessive access granted to dormant service principals or even network security groups configured incorrectly, allowing traffic straight past the perimeter.
It's Security 101.
It is. But when you multiply that across thousands and thousands of resources in a multi-cloud environment, it just becomes this relentless game of whack-a-mole. The sheer complexity of ensuring continuous improvement, it overwhelms human teams.
And that's the core of it. If you can't measure it, you simply can't manage it.
Right.
That complexity demands a standardized, a centrally calculated measurement system.
Right.
It demands a universal scorecard that can translate thousands of these microconfigurations into one digestible, priority-driven metric. And that's where the foundational metric for today's discussion comes in. The Azure Secure Score, or ASS.
So we're introducing the Azure Secure Score as, let's call it the starting pistol.
A good way to put it.
It's Microsoft's free built-in tool. It lives within Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and its mission is pretty straightforward. Check your cloud assets against key security rules, and then distill that health into a single percentage point.
Right, representing your whole organization's security posture.
Exactly. But the key insight we really want to dig into today is that the score itself is just the admission ticket. It's just the start.
Absolutely. Our mission in this deep dive is to move far beyond that initial directional percentage. We need to dissect the complex mechanisms of the score, how that weighted calculation actually works, and critically, that all-or-nothing nature of the controls that forces a more comprehensive remediation.
And then the real strategic pivot comes after that.
That's it. We have to transition from merely chasing points on a scoreboard to defining and implementing a genuine, strategic, cloud security posture management, or CSPM, framework.
And that strategic framework, it's entirely dependent on the advanced capabilities that a real CSPM unlocks, right? We're talking about contextual risk prioritization, leveraging features like attack path analysis to cut through all that security noise and identify those, high blast radius chains that lead directly to a breach.
And looking ahead, we have to talk about securing the next generation of generative AI workloads through AI security posture management.
It's a whole new world.
It is. We're fundamentally moving the conversation from a simple health check to a contextual, resilient, and I think most importantly, a board-ready security strategy. So, yeah, let's unpack this.
Okay, so for our listeners who see that percentage flashing on their Azure dashboard, and maybe it's green, maybe it's a terrifying shade of red, let's define it really clearly. What exactly is the secure score, and how is it presented to you?
The secure score is, at its heart, the numerical representation of your organization's security state. You'll find it right there in the central security dashboard of Microsoft Defender for Cloud, or MDC. That number is then normalized and presented as a percentage, which is just, a lot easier for us humans to track.
Right.
The core concept is simple. It's a comparison of the security tasks you have successfully completed versus the high-value security actions that are, still pending. And the critical implication is that a higher score doesn't just mean you're better at compliance. It means you have demonstrably lowered the level of identified exploitable risk in that environment.
But if it were just a simple count, like you have 100 tasks, you've done 50, so your score is 50%, that would be kind of useless for prioritization, wouldn't it?
Completely useless.
The real intelligence, I assume, is baked into the logic of how it's calculated. It's weighted, and that weighting is the key to knowing where to focus your resources.
Absolutely. The calculation is defined as a weighted aggregate. Microsoft doesn't treat all risks equally, and neither should you. Every single security recommendation that contributes to that score has a specific weight, a point value assigned to it.
And that's based on their threat intelligence.
Precisely. It's based on Microsoft's threat intelligence models, which assess its overall impact on reducing the most common attack surfaces. This whole mechanism is designed to sort of nudge organizations toward proven best practices. So if you complete an action that dramatically reduces your attack surface, say closing a highly exploited network hole, you get significantly more points and a much bigger score increase than if you complete some low-impact single-resource task like a minor logging configuration change.
That immediately gives security teams the internal justification they need, doesn't it? They can go to the engineering teams and say, look, this isn't just another ticket. This one is worth 10 points to our posture.
Exactly. Now let's get into the scoping and the nature of the controls, because this is where teams often run into a bit of friction. So the first nuance is scope. A recommendation might apply to a single resource, like ensuring encryption on one specific SQL database. Or it could apply really broadly at the subscription or even the tenant level, like global identity policies that are governed by Azure AD.
And the second part?
The second, and I'd argue maybe the most crucial design mechanism for driving real comprehensive change, is the all-or-nothing nature of the security control point system.
Okay, let's drill into that all-or-nothing rule. I think that's the mechanism that stops teams from just achieving vanity scores by only tackling the easy-to-fix assets. What does that look like in practice?
So to gain any of the maximum potential points assigned to a security control, and remember, a control is just a logical group of related recommendations, like secure management ports. You have to make sure all resources within that control's scope are compliant.
All of them, no exception.
No exceptions.
Yeah.
So imagine the control is worth 8 points. You have 1,000 virtual machines in scope, and 999 of them are perfect. They comply with the secure management ports control.
Yeah.
But that 1,000th VM,
The one someone forgot about.
the one someone forgot about, is still sitting there, wide open, with RDP or SSH perpetually exposed to the internet. Well, you are awarded 0 of the 8 points for that entire control.
So the security team can't just report back, hey, we secured 99.9% of the environment. They get 0 credit until that single highest risk item is finally fixed.
Precisely. This acts as a really powerful, non-negotiable forcing function. It ensures that security teams can't just cherry-pick the easiest resources to fix while leaving the most critical, high-risk assets exposed. It pushes for true, comprehensive hygiene across the entire environment defined by that control.
Without that rule, you just have organizations hovering at 80% on the easy stuff forever.
Exactly, leaving those few dangerous outliers as these persistent open doors for attackers.
That's a fantastic mechanism for enforcing full organizational accountability. So, okay, let's say we're a new security team. We inherit a score of, I don't know, a dismal 38%, and we need some momentum to prove our value. Where do we target those high-impact quick wins? Which actions give us the biggest immediate score boost?
You focus on the highest weighted items, which are, always tied to the highest risk scenarios. The single highest priority action, and the one that typically gives you the maximum 10 points, is implementing and enforcing multi-factor authentication, MFA, for all users,
Especially admins.
particularly for anyone with administrative and privileged access. The rationale is simple and statistically proven. Turning on MFA blocks an astonishing 99.9% of automated credential stuffing and identity-based attacks.
And we know that's how most breaches start.
Right. Since stolen credentials are the single biggest entry point for cloud breaches, maximizing your identity defense is, by far, the most impactful score booster you can execute.
The 10 points alone can be transformational for a low score. So beyond identity, where does the focus shift for those next tier wins, the, say, 8 to 6 point items?
The next priority tiers focus heavily on mitigating network exposure and ensuring compute integrity. So a few high-impact items would be, 1, securing your management ports.
Getting rid of open RDP.
Yes. This means you have to migrate away from leaving ports like RDP or SSH open 24/7. Instead, you must mandate the use of just-in-time, or JIT, VM access, which only opens those ports temporarily on an explicit request, and only from approved source IP ranges. It's the difference between leaving your house key under the mat all the time or only handing it to the delivery driver for 10 minutes and then taking it right back.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, system updates and patching. Unpatched virtual machines, they remain a top exploited vector, especially in legacy environments. So automated or mandated application of system updates and security patches earns you significant points because it closes known, publicly documented doors for attackers.
And endpoint protection, I assume.
That's number 3. Ensuring comprehensive endpoint detection and response, or EDR solutions, specifically Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, are turned on and working correctly for all your virtual machines is another high-value action.
And finally, I'm guessing data security and access controls cluster around the 4-point mark, but they're often the fix that prevents the most catastrophic loss.
It's exactly right. These actions involve securing your foundational data services. This means aggressively disabling public network access on storage accounts and databases, ensuring all data is encrypted both at rest and in transit, and rigorously implementing conditional access policies to enforce secure sign-in conditions and device compliance.
Is there a real-world example of this?
Yeah, actually, one of the sources highlighted a medium-sized e-commerce company. By prioritizing just these quick wins, MFA, JIT, patching, and locking down their storage accounts, they moved their secure score from a really perilous 28% to a much safer 72% in under 2 months.
Wow.
It just shows the immediate power of that kind of targeted effort.
Now, let's shift gears a little bit to something that shows where Microsoft is taking this metric in the future. You mentioned this dual score model. This signals a fundamental evolution past that simple linear weighting system we've been describing.
Yes. This is a critical development. Currently, we're kind of operating in 2 parallel models. There's the classic secure score, which is what most people see in the standard Azure portal. It uses that traditional linear weighting based on fixed static points.
And the new one.
The more forward-looking advanced model is the cloud secure score, which is risk-based. It lives within the centralized Microsoft Defender portal and is currently in preview.
And the strategic difference between those two is moving from just a compliance check to an effective risk assessment, right?
Yes, precisely. The Cloud Secure Score is dynamic. It moves beyond static points by incorporating deep environmental context. This includes things like the asset's intrinsic criticality to the business, its specific exposure, is it internet-facing, does it handle PCI data or PII, and other environmental risk factors, like whether it's part of a complex attack path.
So it's much smarter.
Much smarter. It enables far more accurate prioritization. It ensures that a medium-severity vulnerability on your core, publicly exposed financial database is weighted far, far heavier and impacts the score more significantly than the exact same issue found on some non-production dev resource that's tucked away behind 3 layers of network isolation. This is the definitive shift toward managing effective risk, rather than just chasing static compliance definitions.
That move toward risk-based scoring brings us perfectly to the platform that hosts all this intelligence and facilitates this strategic shift. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I really like the framing of MDC as the Watchtower. It suggests this comprehensive, centralized vantage point.
That framing is essential because MDC is much more than just a collection of separate tools. It's categorized as a comprehensive cloud-native application protection platform, or CNAPP. Yeah. And what that means is it provides a unified, integrated solution that's designed to secure the entire application lifecycle. It ensures security is embedded all the way from the code repositories, that's the shift left part, through to runtime protection and continuous monitoring. We call it the Watchtower because it provides that end-to-end visibility, continuous risk assessment, and contextual, actionable guidance, all centralized into a single operational hub.
So the security team can basically coordinate the entire defense from one elevated position.
That's the idea.
So it's the single pane of glass, but with all the necessary tools actually built directly in. Our sources clarify that for CSPM, there are 2 distinct tiers available in MDC, Foundational CSPM and Defender CSPM. For organizations that are just starting out, what is the practical functional difference between the free and the paid versions?
The Foundational CSPM tier is the free basic offering. It's enabled by default when you bring a subscription into Defender for Cloud. It gives you the essential security monitoring, basic recommendations, and it monitors compliance specifically against the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark.
So you get the core secure score and the basic configuration checks.
Right. Think of it as your basic security compass. It points you in the right direction.
And the paid offering, Defender CSPM, that's what unlocks the real strategic value we've been talking about.
Absolutely. The Defender CSPM plan is the necessary key for any modern enterprise security strategy. This is the tier that unlocks risk-aware security. It's the contextual risk prioritization we just mentioned, the crucial attack path analysis feature for mapping exploits, Agentless vulnerability scanning, which is huge. It prevents having to install agents on every single VM and container, and the cutting-edge AI security posture management features.
So if your goal is proactive, contextual, risk-aware security that you can actually communicate to the board, you need the Defender CSPM plan.
You need the plan, yes.
Okay, let's break down the traditional security domains that contribute to the overall posture assessment and, as a result, shape the secure score. Let's start with identity, which we know is paramount.
Strong identity controls are the absolute bedrock of all of this. This domain, it scrutinizes the status of your MFA implementation, the adherence to least privilege principles via proper role-based access control, or RBAC, and the sophisticated safeguarding of privileged accounts using identity governance solutions.
And the critical insight there is just reinforcement, isn't it?
It is. Since over 80% of reported breaches involve a compromised identity, hardening this pillar is the foundation upon which all other defenses have to stand. If an attacker gets past your identity layer, all your network segmentation and your patching, they all just become secondary defenses.
Right. So moving on to data protection, the crown jewels.
Data protection ensures the long-term confidentiality and integrity of your sensitive corporate data. This is assessed by confirming encryption is enforced everywhere, both at rest for services like storage accounts and managed databases, and in transit, securing the communication channels with protocols like TLS. Key management practices, usually centralized through services like Azure Key Vault, are also a major control area.
And the risk assessment focuses heavily here.
It has to, because even if an attacker can't execute code, just exfiltrating unsecured data stores leads to massive regulatory fines and, frankly, irreparable reputational damage.
Okay, next up, network security. This often feels like the most complex area just because of the sheer number of possible configuration permutations.
And it is where configuration errors run rampant. Network security controls, they cover defining, enforcing, and monitoring traffic flows using things like network security groups, NSGs, Azure firewall policies, and verifying secure access methods, like mandating that just-in-time VM access.
So the assessment is checking for things like overly permissive rules or unnecessary public exposure.
Exactly, and gaps in segmentation. The ultimate goal is zero trust enforcement at the network layer, ensuring services only communicate with necessary endpoints, which in turn shrinks the effective blast radius of any successful exploit.
And the final domain focuses on compute and VM security, so dealing with the actual operating systems and applications running inside the cloud.
This pillar is all about hardening your virtual machines, your containers, and your serverless functions. This requires robust, continuous VM vulnerability management, like the agentless scanning from Defender CSPM, guaranteeing endpoint protection is active and healthy, and rigorously enforcing the application of critical OS updates and patches.
And I'd imagine using templates is key here.
It's a huge element. Using pre-approved baseline security templates ensures that no virtual machine is ever deployed with a weak or default configuration, preventing those common errors right at the instantiation phase.
Now, all these operational controls, from identity to compute, they're measured not against some arbitrary Microsoft rules, but against a standardized, industry-aligned set of security principles. The Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, or MCSB.
That's the critical link. Your Secure Score is fundamentally a measure of your compliance with the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. And the MCSB is Microsoft's own comprehensive set of security principles. But they aren't, proprietary. They are meticulously built upon, and they map directly to foundational global security frameworks like NIST, ISO 27001, and CIS controls.
But tailored for the cloud.
Specifically tailored for the unique complexities of cloud deployments in Azure.
So if a listener is adhering to the MCSB recommendations, they are effectively adhering to large portions of multiple international compliance standards all at once.
Precisely. The MCSB serves as the default standard applied to all your Azure subscriptions when Defender for Cloud is enabled. It provides immediate standardized baseline assessment without the security team having to manually translate every single control from a compliance document into a technical policy.
Can you give an example?
Sure. An MCSB control might require using encryption for data at rest. That one control fulfills a requirement under both NIST 853 and a specific section of CIS. It provides that essential unified security foundation right out of the box.
Okay, we've established that the Azure Secure Score is a great operational tool. It's a directional health gauge. But let's be honest. If you walk into a boardroom and tell the executive team or the audit committee that your score is 39%, they immediately hit you with a barrage of strategic questions.
Of course.
How many assets are covered? How fast are we actually fixing things? What does this mean for our last audit? That's what I'd call the executive gap.
It's the difference between a pulse reading and a complete medical history, isn't it? A single percentage gauge, it gives comfort, maybe, but it offers zero context about your operational performance or your strategic risk reduction. Executives and auditors, they need quantifiable metrics denominators, velocity, resilience, efficiency measurements.
Just relying on that directional score is completely insufficient.
Entirely. It can't demonstrate genuine operational performance or, critically, prove a continuous reduction in breach likelihood.
So we need to create a sort of KPI dictionary key performance indicators that translates security posture into the language of the business. Let's do a deep dive into the 5 core CSPM metrics that actually matter at that strategic level. Let's start with knowing the scale of the challenge. Coverage.
Right. 1. Coverage percentage. This is maybe the most fundamental metric of all. It's defined as the portion of your entire organizational cloud estate, all subscriptions, all resources, all endpoints, that is currently being measured and assessed by Defender for Cloud.
If you have blind spots, you have unmeasured risk.
You can't manage risk, you don't measure. The formula is simple. It's your in-scope, assessed assets divided by your organization's total discovered assets.
What are the big challenges here? We know shadow IT is a very real thing.
The challenge is often political, not technical. Coverage dips because of abandoned subscriptions, or maybe acquired business units that weren't integrated properly, or developers spinning up non-standard environments outside the standard security scaffolding. That's true, shadow IT.
So you have to look outside of just Azure's own tools.
Often, yes. Measuring total assets requires integrating with broader IT asset management databases, not just Azure's resource graph. For high-maturity organizations, the target for coverage percent is aggressive. You're aiming for 99% or better. Anything less means you have known unmonitored risk exposure.
And who owns that?
This KPI is strategically owned by the platform engineering team because they control the architecture pipeline, and it has to be measured weekly.
Okay, moving to metric number 2, which directly addresses the function of the attack path analysis we'll talk about next. Toxic combo reduction percentage. This sounds like it's all about effectiveness.
It is a high-value KPI because it measures the strategic removal of the most dangerous security patterns, the confluence of individual misconfigurations that, when you combine them, create a high-blast radius chain, making a breach highly probable.
So a toxic combo is never just one vulnerability.
Never. It's a path. For example, a VM that is publicly reachable, has unpatched software, and has privileged access to a critical financial database. Any one of those is a problem. All three together is a ticking time bomb.
So this KPI tracks how well the organization is disrupting those breach-ready paths. How is it calculated, and what's the complexity in measuring it?
It tracks the percentage drop in the number of resources that match any high-risk toxic pattern quarter over quarter. The complexity is in defining what actually constitutes a toxic combo. It requires advanced CSPM tools like Defender to model those connections contextually. You can't do this manually.
And if you define it wrong?
If you define a toxic combo too broadly, you generate too much noise, too narrowly, and you miss emerging threats. For a highly regulated organization, the target is aggressive. You're aiming for a minimum of a 50% reduction in the count of known toxic combos, probably measured monthly or quarterly. This metric is owned by security engineering, and it's the purest measure of risk mitigation strategy.
Metric number 3 measures resilience, which is absolutely key in a dynamic environment. Drift, MTTR, mean time to remediate. This is all about how quickly you snap back into a secure state after a configuration error or drift happens.
Drift MTPR measures velocity. It's the mean time required from the moment a posture regression, a misconfiguration, a new policy violation is detected, to the exact moment that non-compliance is closed and the resource is back in a healthy state. This metric is a pure measure of your operational resilience and efficiency. If your infrastructure as code is robust and your automation is fast, this time is low.
That sounds incredibly aggressive for a global organization, especially one with manual change management processes. What's the single biggest factor that typically prevents teams from hitting a rapid MTTR target?
It is almost always process friction, specifically ticket routing and human handoffs. If detection happens in 2 minutes, but the ticket sits in a queue for 20 hours before an engineer even starts to work on it, you've lost. The goal is to move the time calculation down to the time between ticket assignment and closure, bypassing that notification latency, and then focusing heavily on automation to eliminate the human step entirely.
What's a good target?
For scale-up or enterprise tiers, the target should be less than 24 hours. A highly regulated environment should strive for less than 12. And you compute this weekly, linking your posture assessment logs with your change management logs. It's typically owned by SRE or platform engineering.
Okay, next up is the quantification of engineering efficiency, percentage auto remediation. This is about removing the human toil associated with MTTR.
This metric quantifies exactly how much manual, repetitive work you are successfully removing from your engineers' plates. It measures the share of security violations, not just those that were fixed, but those that were fixed automatically by a policy or a workflow within your defined service level agreement, or SLA. The calculation is the number of automatically fixed violations divided by the total number of violations detected.
This is the metric you'd use to justify a major investment in automation tools like Azure Policy or Logic apps. What's a good benchmark for a truly mature, highly automated environment?
For an enterprise tier, the goal should be 60% or more. If you hit 60%, it means more than half of your security violations require zero human intervention. Highly regulated environments should strive for 70%. Achieving this goal drastically reduces operational costs, mitigates human error, and most importantly, frees up your highly paid security engineers to focus on modeling strategic threats rather than fixing mundane encryption errors. This one is also primarily owned by the platform engineering team.
And the final KPI is focused purely on compliance, but with a strong tie-in to business acceleration, audit cycle time.
Audit cycle time measures the time, typically in hours, that it takes for your organization to fully assemble all the necessary compliance evidence for a specific framework audit, say, HIPAA or PCI DSS, from the moment the request is made to the end-to-end delivery of the evidence.
In regulated industries, speeding this up isn't just a security matter.
No, it directly accelerates sales cycles, customer onboarding, and crucial renewal processes that often require these rapid evidence packets.
So reducing this time is a direct business enabler.
Absolutely. A regulated organization should target less than 6 hours for full evidence assembly. Even a scale-up should aim for under 8. The way you achieve this is by having continuous compliance scanning enabled in Defender for Cloud with all evidence linked to policies, and crucially, leveraging the continuous data export functionality to pre-stage all your compliance artifacts in a searchable data warehouse.
So when an auditor asks for evidence of MFA enforcement across all privileged accounts, you can just run a query.
And you should have the report in minutes, not days.
That leads us perfectly from the KPIs to the how. You can't just pull these 5 metrics off the standard Azure portal dashboard. This requires operationalizing a data pipeline.
This pipeline is non-negotiable for strategic CSPM. Step 1 is enabling continuous export from Defender for Cloud. You have to stream all your raw, volatile posture data, the secure score trend, all the individual recommendations, the policy states, asset inventory details to a centralized repository. This is usually Azure Log Analytics, maybe Azure Event Hubs, or a dedicated data warehouse like Snowflake or Fabric. This moves the data from the transactional portal view into a state where it can be historically analyzed and aggregated.
But the data itself, just the raw recommendation output, is kind of useless without context, right? You need to know who owns the misconfigured resource and what its business purpose is to calculate meaningful MTTR or toxic combos.
That is step 2, normalizing the data using a common entity model. This means mandatory, enforced tagging of resources. You need fields like owner, application name, environment, prod, staging, dev, and a clear criticality rating. You have to join the security posture data from, say, the security recommendation table with the operational and governance context from the resource graph or your tags. Without these tags, you can't compute MTTR by owner or toxic combos specifically targeting your production PII environment. The tagging architecture is the foundation of strategic measurement.
And once that normalized data is flowing into log analytics, that's where KQL, the Custo query language, transforms that raw data into these sophisticated KPIs.
KQL is the engine room of your strategic CSPM reporting. You use it to query the specific data tables that are populated by the continuous export. For instance, the historical secure score data lives in the secure scores table. Individual recommendation status is in security recommendation. To compute drift MTTR, you need to query that security recommendation data and join it with asset creation and change logs to compute the time delta between the violation time and the closure time.
Can you give us a brief conceptual example of how KQL is used here, going beyond just finding a simple average score?
Certainly. To compute the toxic combo reduction metric, you would use a complex KQL query that first filters the security recommendation table for high-severity findings, then it joins that with network traffic flow logs from Azure Diagnostics to see which of those resources are publicly exposed, and then finally joins that result with a custom table of your asset criticality tags.
Then you trend it over time.
You trend the counter count of those joined results over time. It's the ability of KQL to join these disparate data sets, posture, network, and governance context, that transforms the data from being a static list of vulnerabilities into a dynamic strategic risk model. This entire process export normalized query is what elevates the Azure Secure Score from a directional percentage into a defensible board-ready performance framework.
So we've shifted from just chasing points to chasing strategic KPIs like MTTR and toxic combos. But even with great KPIs, there's a persistent, overwhelming problem for SecOps teams, and that's security noise. You can still have thousands of active recommendations. So how does Defender for Cloud help SecOps teams focus only on the risks that truly matter right now?
This is the critical function of the risk prioritization engine that's within Defender CSPM. Traditional security tools, they often rely on static severity. If a vulnerability is CDE 2023 whatever, its severity is defined as high. This engine, however, it dynamically assesses risk by factoring in deep environmental context, the resource configuration, the network topology, who has access, and then it combines that with external real-world risk factors like exploitability and the potential business impact if it were compromised.
So the goal is to sort recommendations by their effective risk, not just their static severity rating.
Exactly. The engine assigns a risk level, critical, high, medium, low, based on that effective risk. So if a vulnerability is typically defined as high severity, but it exists on an isolated development server that has no sensitive data and no external network routing, its effective risk might be intelligently lowered to medium or even low.
And that frees up the team.
It frees the security team to focus their immediate attention on a technically medium-severity vulnerability that just happens to be sitting on a mission-critical, internet-facing component. This context-aware calculation is what ensures security teams address the issues that pose the most immediate, exploitable threats in their unique environment.
And the ultimate visualization tool for this effective risk is Attack Path Analysis, APA, which is only available with the Defender CSPM plan. This feels like the game changer that moves security teams from being reactive checklist fillers to being strategic defenders.
APA is the operational core of proactive defense. It leverages Defender for Cloud's proprietary graph-based algorithm to model and locate all potential attack paths specific to your unique infrastructure topology, even across hybrid and multi-cloud environments. The tool doesn't just list vulnerabilities, it maps out the exact sequence of misconfigurations, open ports, and overly permissive access controls that an attacker could leverage step by step to reach a defined business-critical target.
Okay, give us a detailed, hypothetical breach scenario that APA would uncover that a traditional vulnerability scanner might completely miss.
Okay, let's use what we'll call the case of the exposed VM and the internal storage key. A traditional scanner might report two isolated medium risks. One, a virtual machine, let's call it VMA, has a medium severity software flaw. And two, a storage account, SA1, has an overly permissive role-based access control assignment allowing a certain service identity read access.
Two separate medium risks, probably not at the top of the list.
Probably not. But APA connects the dots. It reveals that the specific service identity that's assigned to VMA has the permissions needed to access SA1. And crucially, it then finds that VMA is currently exposed to the public internet because of some forgotten NSG rule.
Ah, I see the path now.
The attack path is this. An attacker exploits the medium severity flaw on the internet-facing VMA, gets a foothold, then automatically inherits the privileged service identity of VMA, and uses that identity to move laterally and exfiltrate the sensitive data from SA1.
Wow.
APA visualizes this toxic combination instantly, and it prioritizes the remediation of one of those three components, the NSG rule, the VM flaw, or the RBAC permission, as a critical task. It cuts through the noise that might have otherwise buried these isolated medium risks.
This directly ties back to our KPI of toxic combinations. APA is the mechanism that identifies these high blast radius chains in real time.
Absolutely. It helps you visualize that toxic combination. The internet-facing asset, paired with an exploitable vulnerability, paired with an overly permissive identity that provides sensitive access. And if you remediate any single node in that chain, for example, just removing the overly permissive RBAC assignment, you break the entire chain, even if the VM remains unpatched for a few more days. This capability is revolutionary for risk reduction.
And this leads us to the most strategic concept for allocating resources, The choke point. This is where efficiency meets strategic security.
Identifying choke points is the key to efficient remediation and, frankly, justifying security spending. A choke point is a single point of failure, a single resource, a single configuration, or a single identity where multiple, seemingly unrelated potential attack paths all converge.
So, an example.
For instance, if 5 different attack paths leading to 5 different critical data stores all rely on exploiting one outdated network security group rule or one service principal with excessive permissions, that single rule or principle is the choke point.
The strategic value there is massive. Instead of 5 different teams fixing 5 different problems, you get exponential risk reduction by targeting one configuration fix.
Exactly. Remediating that single choke point neutralizes dozens of potential breach vectors simultaneously. It allows security leadership to justify pulling resources from various teams to focus on a single high-leverage fix, rather than spreading effort thinly across the environment, chasing every isolated vulnerability. APA helps you identify where to spend your security budget for the maximum possible return on investment.
This kind of visibility allows organizations to operationalize security with a bit of a cultural twist: gamification. We saw in the sources that tracking the secure score and these new KPIs per team can really drive security hygiene.
Security is ultimately a cultural problem. Gamification is the application of the secure score and these high-level KPIs to drive positive behavioral changes among your engineering and platform teams. You create real-time leaderboards or scorecards based on metrics like score change over time or drift MTTR, especially if you measure it per team, and high-risk closure rate. This transforms security from being just a corporate mandate into a shared, measurable goal.
And the emphasis has to be heavily placed on relative improvement, doesn't it? Rather than the ultimate perpetual chase for a 100% score.
This is critical for motivation and for fairness. Imagine a DevOps team inherits an old, messy subscription that's starting at a 30% secure score. They might never achieve the 90% target, and trying to force them to will just lead to burnout and discouragement. However, if they successfully improve the score by 20 percentage points in a single month, they should be publicly rewarded for that measured risk reduction. Rewarding relative improvement motivates teams inheriting those high-risk legacy environments, and it shifts the focus from an unreachable, static goal to one of continuous, measurable progress and accountability. You want teams to own their score, and they'll only own what they can realistically change.
Our journey has moved from runtime security in the cloud to strategic KPIs, but modern defense requires that we go left. We have to shift security earlier into the development process.
Let's talk about shift-left security and the evolution of DevSecOps within the CNAPP framework of Defender for Cloud.
Security integration needs to be seamless. The whole goal of shift left is to prevent configuration weaknesses and code-level vulnerabilities from ever reaching those volatile, exploitable production environments in the first place. And Defender for Cloud provides some really innovative, deep integration with development workflows, moving far beyond just, scanning a repository at checkout. One of the most fascinating capabilities mentioned in the sources is the deep bidirectional integration with platforms like GitHub Advanced Security. This creates a true code-to-cloud integration loop.
This bidirectional flow is a game changer for developer trust. When Defender for Cloud, our Watchtower, detects a critical, exploitable vulnerability in a running workload in the production cloud, it now feeds that specific contextual runtime intelligence directly back into the developer's environment. For example, it might automatically create a high-priority work item or a pull request in GitHub that points directly to the line of source code responsible for that production flaw.
So the developer isn't just told, hey, you have a vulnerability. They are told, the vulnerability you committed on line 42 of this file is actively exploitable in production right now because of this specific network context.
Exactly. The key benefit is a massive improvement in the prioritization of exploitable flaws. Developers are, notoriously skeptical of security scanners that flag thousands of theoretical issues that may never be relevant in runtime.
The classic wall of red.
The wall of red. By connecting runtime threat intelligence back to the code source, teams can focus their precious remediation time exclusively on the vulnerabilities that are truly exploitable and pose an active risk in the production environment. This efficiency drastically shortens remediation cycles, and it builds mutual trust between the dev and sec teams.
And this capability also extends to preventing insecure deployments before they even happen through the analysis of infrastructure as code.
Yes. The IAC security component of MDC is crucial for ensuring security by default. It analyzes your IAC templates, whether they're Bicep, ARM, or Terraform, before they're ever deployed. It detects common misconfigurations that would lead to low secure scores or toxic combinations later on.
Like what?
Things like identifying overly exposed access controls in a template, unencrypted storage definitions, or network rules that grant excessive public access by default. By flagging these insecure configurations during the pull request phase, organizations prevent configuration drift and that whole resource hardening headache later on. You cut off the risk before it's even born.
Okay, now let's pivot to the bleeding edge. AI security. The rapid deployment of generative AI workloads, especially using services like Azure, OpenAI, Amazon Bedrock, and Google Vertex AI, it's introducing entirely new threat models that demand a specialized approach. AI security posture management, or AI SPM.
This is the next phase for the Watchtower, right? Securing intelligence itself. Because AI systems, they rely on complex application stacks, vulnerable dependencies, and often highly sensitive training data. Visibility is the primary challenge. Traditional CSPM tools focused on VMs and storage. AI SPM has to focus on the models, the orchestration layers, and the data pipelines.
So how does MDC address that?
MDC addresses this by automatically discovering AI workloads, from the training endpoint all the way to the deployed model, and crucially, by creating an AI bill of materials, or an AI bomb.
That AI bomb sounds like the ingredients list for a potential security disaster. What exactly is included in that manifest?
The AI bomb is a detailed inventory that identifies all the application components, the proprietary data sources, and the specific AI artifacts that are utilized from code to cloud. It identifies the model version, the specific orchestration libraries like LangChain or prompt flows, and vulnerable underlying dependencies like specific versions of Python packages like TensorFlow or PyTorch, which might contain known software flaws that could be exploited for data leakage or model manipulation. The goal is to give security teams the visibility they need over their black box AI systems.
And does the attack path analysis capability we talked about earlier extend its view to these AI-specific risks?
It absolutely has to, and it does. APA now incorporates AI-specific nodes into its graph model. It's identifying toxic combinations that are unique to the AI ecosystem. For instance, it might identify an attack path where a managed database with sensitive PII used to train a proprietary AI model is exposed via an unencrypted API endpoint that has no rate limiting or authentication. This contextual risk analysis is vital for securing the training, fine-tuning, and deployment phases, protecting against risks like prompt injection, model poisoning, and data exfiltration through the model's outputs.
Finally, let's bring it all back to reducing that drift MTTR. Speed of remediation is meaningless if the fix still takes a human days to execute. Automation is the only viable path to achieving those sub-24-hour targets.
Automation at scale is what reduces that window of vulnerability from days to just minutes. Organizations primarily leverage two core Azure mechanisms for this: Azure Policy for infrastructure enforcement and Logic Apps for complex, multi-step orchestration.
Let's start with Azure Policy. How does it enforce security and stop drift at the infrastructure layer?
Azure Policy provides two immensely powerful enforcement effects that prevent and correct drift. The first is the deny effect. This is the strongest enforcement. It simply prevents the deployment of an insecure resource in the first place. If a developer tries to deploy a storage account without enforced encryption, the deny policy blocks the deployment, returns an error, and ensures security by default.
And the second effect is for automatic remediation.
That's the deploy if node exists effect, or DINE. DINE policies constantly scan your existing resources. If they find a non-compliant resource, for example, a VM deployed without diagnostic settings enabled, the DINE policy is triggered. It then automatically executes a defined remediation template, like an ARM or BICEP template, to apply the missing configuration enabling encryption, turning on diagnostic settings, or enforcing tags without any human intervention. DINE policies fix existing configuration drift in minutes, which drastically reduces your MTTR.
So, policy handles the simple infrastructure-level enforcement. But if the fix requires complex orchestration collaboration, integration with ticketing, running custom scripts, that requires the second mechanism, Logic Apps.
That's where workflow automation with Logic Apps comes in. Logic Apps are used for those complex, multi-step tasks that go beyond simple configuration enforcement. They are triggered by security alerts or recommendations that originate from Defender for Cloud. For example, a critical security alert like an external IP attempting repeated brute force attacks on a publicly exposed VM could automatically trigger a Logic App workflow.
Walk us through what that automation workflow would look like.
Okay, so the Logic App triggers. In sequence, it performs orchestration. Step 1, it notifies the application owner and the Security Operations Center via Microsoft Teams or email. Step 2, it opens a priority P1 ticket in Jira or Azure DevOps, linking the full alert context. Then, Step 3, it executes an Azure CLI script or an Azure function to temporarily isolate the compromised virtual machine by modifying its associated network security group to block all inbound and outbound traffic. This multi-step contextual response is key to cutting down the total time to respond from hours to mere minutes. It demonstrates real operational agility. Hashtag outro.
This has been an incredibly detailed and strategic deep dive. Let's quickly recap the transformation that we've charted today, moving from a simple health check to a truly contextual strategy.
We started with the foundational metric, the Azure Secure Score. It's the essential entry point. It provides that directional guidance, and it quantifies basic hygiene efforts through a necessary weighted point system and that critical all-or-nothing rule.
But relying solely on that score is strategically insufficient. Mastery requires implementing strategic KPIs for the boardroom. We need quantifiable metrics like coverage percentage to aggressively eliminate blind spots, toxic combo reduction to actively target those most dangerous breach paths, and a lightning-fast drift MTTR to measure our operational resilience and speed.
And this entire strategic vision is enabled by advanced platforms like Defender CSPM, which provides that contextual prioritization through the risk prioritization engine and attack path analysis. This intelligence allows teams to focus their finite resources on strategic choke points, neutralizing multiple threats with one single high-leverage fix, rather than spreading their effort thin across all the isolated vulnerabilities.
And finally, we saw how automation, through rigorous Azure policy, DYNE enforcement, and dynamic logic app orchestration, integrates security into the rapid pace of cloud innovation. And it extends protection from the IAC codebase all the way through to new frontiers, like the highly complex realm of generative AI workloads and the need for an AI boom.
Indeed, it all leads to a singular vital truth. Security is no longer a quest to eliminate risk entirely. That's impossible in the cloud, but rather about managing it smartly, ensuring that your organization is both fast and demonstrably resilient against the most probable attack vectors.
And that resilience is going to be tested severely in the years immediately ahead. As organizations rush to deploy autonomous AI agents, and I think IDC estimated it's going to be 1.3 billion by 2028, the core security challenge shifts radically. It moves from securing passive infrastructure to securing intelligent, independent systems.
That's right. The Watchtower must now secure not just the underlying infrastructure, but the very intelligence that learns and operates on it. This requires continuous posture management for the AI agents themselves, monitoring their permissions, their evolving data access, and their autonomous actions to prevent them from becoming lateral movement paths for attackers. If we can't secure these agentic systems that act and learn independently, that 99% misconfiguration problem is only going to become exponentially more complex. That is the fundamental strategic challenge waiting for every security professional today, securing the intelligence itself.